Daddy, the Right Reverend Dr. Olukayode Adebogun.
Praise the Lord. It will have been my preference not to be the one talking today, so I can reserve my whatever energy is left for tomorrow. But that's okay. Well, for our American brothers, don't worry, I will not leave you alone out of this conversation. Be rest assured. I know it's always an interesting topic for us to I sure hope they know we are hearing them. Mama, people's wording, we can hear you. Praise the Lord. Well, I'm told I need to talk on successful immigration. Those are two powerful words. And there's a rule you will find in every, whether you're an immigration lawyer, full-fledged, or you're an immigration counsel. Some of you don't even know there's a difference. There's something you are warned never to use. And that word is guarantee. And if you don't want to sell your license very quickly, we'll never use that word. So when you say successful, maybe if I had my option, I would change your topic. Because we can't predict. Again, it's like going to court. I say to clients, when you go to court, the best you will do is you defend your client. Put your best foot forward. But sadly, you're not going to be the judge. Is that true? And of course, the crown is going to come to do the same thing, or the prosecutor. Whatever you call them, whether you call them the crown in Canada or you call them prosecutor on the other side, he or she is going to come to do the same thing. But at the end of the day, somebody is going to win. And sadly, somebody might lose. Or better still, the judge might go one way or the other. And so, it is difficult to say, as far as immigration, you can't guarantee success. And you wonder why I choose to start my presentation from there. You cannot. And there's one that I always like to add when I talk to clients. I say, look, I am not divine. I love the ovation sometimes. I love when people say, we just get a phone call. I said to someone, I can't remember the last time we advertised in the newspaper, or not that we don't love doing advertisement, but because we know it's, again, you build the relationship, you build the reputation for so long that even when Saxtel is calling to, what do they call that one? What do you call that book? The 411. I spend less money on them now. And when Google calls and say, hey, let's try and see if we can put your website on top, I decline. By default, after a while, because of the number of years, you get it. By default. Okay? And so, take note of those two introductory points. We're not divine. And no one is. And no immigration lawyer, no immigration counsel can use the word guarantee success. It's not true. You may have relationship. Once in a while, we get to know who is what we call the IPM, the immigration program manager in a particular location, because you are privileged to either meet her, meet him somewhere, or you send a message. You may have relationship, but that is not the guarantee of success. Of course, what we all like is to keep our success rate very high, and that is good. So, I'll still keep your topic as it is because that's what you want to discuss, successful immigration, but at least with those two prefaces or sentences or comments, you know why I try to question that topic. Well, you all know what immigration is. All of us want to, if you are leaving from the US to Canada, you are also immigrating. And if you are leaving from Canada to US, it's the same thing. Let me put it in clear terms so that I can accommodate our American brothers. If you are a green card holder in the United States, or you are an American citizen, you do not need a visa to come to Canada. Right? You can come in anytime, you can go out anytime, and if you have to work, there are processes for you to follow. Sometimes you can get certain documents at the port of entry. So carry your bag, show up at the port of entry, you can get certain documents there that will allow you to do what you want to do. I used to have one client that, I don't know, he found us online. Again, that's the advantage. And this man will drive 9 hours. The first time he came, I thought it was a joke, and he had to drive from, is it Minnesota? And he drove to Regina. He said, well, somebody said you can turn things around for us. I said, you do 8 to 9 hours. I said, you could have just called me. Well, after the first one, God helped us. He was successful. So I said to him, please don't drive again every year. Just send me what I need. I know what you want, and I'm going to do it. And every year, all I get is just a phone call. All he does, he's on a fishing trip. And they want this temporary permit to be able to do the work in Saskatchewan. I said, look, I'm not. And after the verification, I know he's an American citizen. The passport is real. Just stay there. I'll do what I need to do. I'll get it to you online. Take it to the port of entry. You're going to be fine. And for the past 8, 9 years, we've really enjoyed the relationship. But the bother was, how can somebody drive? The first time, I mean, that's quite a distance. I'm sure he has driven past so many offices before making that decision. I don't know. Well, we thank those who choose to refer. So, if you're an American citizen, take note of that. Now, if you're a Canadian citizen, you can do this. You can go to the U.S. anytime you want and come back. In fact, there are categories that will allow you to work. And there's a certain class of application. If you're an American citizen, for instance, there's a way you can apply for your green card from here. It's a different class of application, obviously. And so, some of you have heard of what we used to call NAFTA before, North American Free Trade Agreement. And everybody's afraid because our brother is coming in January. Some of you think he's not a lover of immigration. You're wrong. And I can say that. I'm in the industry and I know what immigration in the U.S. has been in the past 4 years, and I know what it used to be, especially for clergy, under him when he was the president. But I'm not going to be going into that today. All right? But some of these things you hear outside, some of us who are insiders, you are shaking your head and saying, I believe that our clergy in the U.S. now should have become green card holders. And I know some of them are still waiting. It was not like that 4 years ago. It was not. And I'm 100% sure of it because I'm in the industry. But again, we hear all these other stories and we are tempted to believe. And the ones circulating saying, oh, all night professionals in so country, you are going to be refused visa, stay in your country. It's a fake video. Watch the lips of the person talking. Plus, how can a president-elect say that? It's not possible. It's not true. Just watch that video again and you get the truth that it's not authentic. So beware of AI these days. It's not everything that glitters that is gold. Beware of There's so much information about immigration, whether to Canada or US online. Watch it. I beg you. Check things out. Don't just take it. You might get into trouble. You might get into trouble. For the first time in our country here, you have more students claiming refugee in Canada. For the first time. Because of some of the radical changes that took place in the past 6 months. And now, for the first time, in many, many years, we have more students claiming refugee in Canada. It was not like that, at least for the past 15, 20 years, no. And the reason I'll talk about very soon. And so, Canadian citizens have that privilege. Now, let me add one more. If you are a permanent resident of Canada, sorry, you still need a visa to go to US. Take note. Green card holders can come in. Citizens of America can come in. But we don't have that. And I'll never forget the date that changed. I think it was March 17, 2003 or so. And then that was the day it became, if you are a permanent resident of Canada, you need to get a visa to still go to US. So don't show up at the border because you are PRO. So don't say I did not warn you. So yes, they can. That's the reason. Again, we can't go into that. There was an incident that took place, and sadly, the entrance was through Canada. And I'm sure you've seen in the past 1 week, there was an emergency meeting called this week by the Prime Minister and the Premier, because the incoming president hinted that there's going to be a 25% tariffs. And his concern was very clear. It's not about the tariffs, because our border is loose. And that was why they called that meeting on Tuesday. And the Premier got the message. What US is saying is, fix your border, or this is going to happen. That 25% was not the main thing. And if you're watching the news in the past 2 days, being a big issue in this country, because too many things are is going on at the Canadian border, which is not good, sorry. And the Americans are thinking, tighten that one, then the other part will be okay. And so, I'm sure the Premier, some of them are reacting that, yes, we also need to tighten our borders so that things, we're neighbors to the United States, right? And so, while we want to protect ourselves, we also need to be conscious of our other friend. So, the new name is no longer NAFTA, it is USMCA. I think that's what United States, Canada, and Mexico. It used to be called NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. And so, there are things, as Canadian citizens, for instance, there are certain jobs you can apply, you can take in the US. There are certain jobs Americans can take here, and Mexicans can take advantage of the same thing. So under the free trade agreement, we can do that. So if you are considering Canada as American citizen, or you are considering Canada as United States as Canadian citizen, check it out. See if your occupation is on that list. If your occupation is on that list, it might be easier than you think. And don't pay it out. I'm not saying don't come and pay us, so we'll collect it. But you may not need to go through that lengthy process, because people you don't understand that there are simple things that could be done. So that's my foundation. Now, for some of you who want to come, some of us are from the best continent in the whole world, called Africa, right? And we want to come here. Certainly, there's no free trade agreement between Canada and Africa. And the day they started, well, I did not say anything. All I know is the day we start that, we will empty that continent. And you can be sure you know the implication. And I don't see that happening for now. For now. But we can be great if we also tighten our border, right? On the other side, and do things right. We have the potential. Now, so when I say immigration to Canada, how do you come in here? When you are visiting, when you are a temporary resident, technically, you are not immigrating. to Canada. That's not really, that's not it. I know everything is lumped under the same name, immigration. You're actually immigrating, well, the way we use it now, let me use it that way, temporarily or permanently. They are two separate things. You can come in as a temporary resident. You can also come in as a permanent resident. We all know that, right? So we only have two categories, none more. If you are not coming in as temporary, you are coming in as permanent. So if you come in as a visitor, you are a temporary resident. There are certain forms that you will see and they say, are you a resident of Regina? Some of you are thinking they are saying, are you a permanent resident of Regina? That's not what it means. If you live there, you're a resident of that place. So you need to say yes to that question. It's not saying, are you a permanent resident or, immigration-wise. So there are two separate things. Sometimes we get those words confused. But all I'm saying to you is you can come as temporary or permanent. There is no crime if you come in as permanent resident. Some will. And there are different streams. I'll mention a few and then I'll wrap up later. And then the temporary residence is the common one in some quarters. By temporary residence, if you come in as a visitor. Now, if I come to your house as a visitor, do I take over the key? Do I become the owner of that house? No. But so the same thing applies. But we come in and assume that because I'm here as a visitor, I should be able to take over. It's a wrong notion, and it's because of some of the false advertisement that we see in the African continent. Sometimes I see some advertisement and I'm shaking my head. I'm thinking, and some people will be paying thousands, and you just zip your mouth. There was a time I saw one visa. I've never seen that type of visa in my life. It's not regular visa. Demand. I said, how much did you pay? He told me the amount. I kept quiet. These days I'm learning to be quiet, not because I don't know the answer. I kept quiet. At the point, I called the husband. I said, if your wife show up at the airport, please make sure the cab that is taking her there is around. She said, what do you mean? I just said, I'm just advising you. And I meant it. And jokingly I said, that paper in your hand is from Oluwole. The man is still in trouble. I told him straight. I said, that paper in your hand is from Oluwole. And you know what that means? Sadly, it's not. He said, they told him he can use that to get to Cotonou, and then from Cotonou he will fly to Canada. I said, my brother, this vehicle that will take her there, just make sure that vehicle is around. So that when what I'm saying happens, she can just turn back and say, okay, we are going back home. So beware of that. So if you're a visitor, listen to this. Anyone can apply for visitor visa. If you qualify, you qualify, right? And then once you come in, by law, you cannot walk. Hello? Some of us don't want to hear that. By law, I know that is what you call whatever your hand findeth to do. But I will not talk about that now. But by law, you cannot walk. By law, when you come as a student, you can study. Is that true? And walk too. I just told you cannot walk as a student, as a visitor. But I said you can study. Is that true? Somebody said yes. I just want to test you. Is it true? Those of you are here. Well, I'd like to tell you you're wrong if you say no. You can. No, yes, you can. I will tell you now how you can, and the last. If the course you want to take is less than 6 months, if the course of study is less than 6 months, you're allowed. it must not be more than 180 days. Take note. It must not be more than 180. If it's 181, you are breaking the law. It must not be more than 6 months. So if you want to do a 3-month course, shoot for it. If you want to do a 2-week program, go for it. Yes. But if you go more than 6 months, if CBSA visits you, I will charge you a lot to defend you. Right? We'll talk about the detention very soon. Because there are rights that you have, even in detention. All right. So quickly, as a visitor, you cannot work. 0. But you can take a program of 6 months or less, but not more than that. Are we on the same page? Now, is it possible for you to change your status as a visitor? Yes, but challenging. We've had to change some status from visitor to other things. It's doable. It may be challenging for certain programs. And there are some applications you will submit. The officer will tell you, go back to your country of residence and apply for the same thing. But it is possible. So visitor visa. There are some who will come in as visitors and they have a reason. There was a time, of course, there was a change. You know, during COVID, many people took advantage of that, right? The government opened the door. Especially if you were willing to work in the health sector. For those of you who don't understand, I will help you. Because of COVID at that time now, people who are working in the health sector, I say, well, it's like saying, if you die, you're on your own. Right? So, some people got their papers through that, by the way. But some of us are laughing and saying, hey. So, now you let them, if you die, you have wasted yourself, technically, at that point. Sadly, that part has been taken out. It's gone. Gone for now, okay? It's not there anymore. And, of course, as a visitor, you can switch depending. One easy trick. I'm being recorded, right? Okay. Sometimes, remember I said you can study for 6 months. Especially if your goal is to switch to a student. Take advantage of that 6 months. Especially if you're going to think of prerequisite courses. That may help you to switch. May. M-A-Y. Especially if you have prerequisite courses. You want to demonstrate to the officer that, listen, I came in, I needed to do this 3 months of English ESL, English as second language. Now I am successful. I want to use that. Now, and in the immigration system, that's what we call dual intention. It is not against the law. In fact, it is legal, it's legitimate. Dual intention. I came in as a visitor, but if the opportunity is ripe or good, I will consider A, B, C, D. Dual intention. It's not against the law. Sometimes, though, if the officer asks you and you deny it, you could get yourself into. It's not against the law. So, but just be sure how you present it. Okay? We can't say everything about immigration today. Take note. Visitor visa. Now, some of you want to come in as students, right? And Canada has been, it's not the best place in the past 3 to 4 months. Some of you have seen all the dramas going on, right? And you saw the protest this week. Some of you watching the news, students who choose to camp outside say, until you reverse the thing, we will stay in the cold. I laughed. I said, you want to die. That's all the things I wish I could just call any of those guys and say, oh boy, look for a solution. No. This is what you are doing. And watch it was on the CTV news just this week. Like some of them felt frustrated. I get it. I get it. They said, well, you promised us this. And some of you already know, even the postgraduate work permit, it's been tampered with this week. Some of you students trying to bring their wives, especially for undergraduate. You know, this government have tightened it again now. So there's been some significant changes. In fact, officers have been given instruction for bad news. They are going to intentionally refuse some people, even when they have money. And it's not a secret. It's there, and they've been told, reduce the number of students coming in. And so sadly, some people are going to be refused. And people are being refused. Now, that's what we call the PAL now, Provincial Attestation Letter. There was nothing like that until January this year. When you come in as a student, you don't need a PA. You apply and you come in. All you just need is your DLI, Designated Learning Institution Number. But now they have introduced the PAL, January this year. So if you are coming to study in Saskatchewan, apart from you being admitted, the province will have to issue a DAL. And usually that DAL will be valid for 2 months, 3 months. And you must apply for your visa within that period. And I love the way they always say it. They'll say, it will end by 23 hours, 59 seconds of that day. I love it. You know, it's interesting. And just for the fun of it, I guess, whoever crafted that letter, just want you to know that the DLA will expire. So once your PAL is expired, if you apply for a study permit, thank you for donating to Canada Immigration. Yes, thank you for donating. So take note. So some of you with brothers and sisters in Canada, in the US, these things matter. Significant changes. Sadly, we're going to have a few more before this year ends. And some of us are aware of it. So I was chatting with somebody today. I said we're watching the terrain to see which one. Sometimes the way we walk is going to have to change going forward. It's just what it is, the law of the land. Right? And so the number of students, visa officers have been told to reduce it. It's not a secret. It's there in the public domain. They are trying to reduce the number of students coming in. So expect more refusers, period, for students. Okay? The PAL, what they are trying to do is to make sure that people actually go to school. For the past few years, some countries have taken advantage of Canada. And you can see so many of them. I know of some of the countries in question. Because they gave them what we call Student Direct Stream, SDS. They can go through the Students Direct Stream, and in Nigeria, we have the Nigerian Direct Stream also. India also had that advantage. And so once you go through the SDS, when we're pumping in 20 students, 30 students, 50 students. Now they've closed, now the NDS for Nigeria, they shut it down last month, right? So that's done. There's nothing like Student Direct Stream again if you are from Nigeria. Right? And they made it public, so it's not. So if anybody is still advertising in Nigeria, well, may God help them. There's nothing we can do. But the government is very clear. We shut that down. We're no longer doing it. Okay? Now, I'm not a bearer of bad news today, forgive me. But these things are policies that have come in the past 6 months. The past 6 months. So for students, we want students to come to Canada, but certainly they are also trying to shoot for the best of the best. The number will be reduced, and for some of them who want to come in with their other half, especially for undergraduate students, they may be told no. You want to study, come and study. But we all know how difficult that is when you don't have your spouse. In the past, your spouse will come in and they can have open work permit and work while you go to school. Right? And the reason is obvious. Canada is also feeling the unemployment now. And it is important that we take care of those who are already inside. And in a sense, I'll reason with the government. Housing is getting to be a nightmare in some places. Everybody's competing for the same, and we're not building enough. Where are these students going to stay? What about those who are already here? Some of us are here. You're going to stay somewhere, and you're bringing in more. Are they going to stay under the bridge? Who's going to build those homes? So, in a sense, understand where the government is coming from. Especially in some areas. It's getting difficult. Some of you probably know how long it took you to rent a place. And when you're trying to rent, look at how much they're asking for now. And you still want to bring more. Where are they going to stay? So we need to do something with our own infrastructure. What about the unemployment? It's also eating this country. So those challenges are there. Did I say students can no longer apply? Thank you. I did not say that. It is possible. You can still study here. And even in the church, our seminaries are still there. We are very careful with some of them because of the teaching. We don't want you to come in as a Christian and graduate as an unbeliever. So we're very, very careful with some seminaries. I'm talking a Christian forum, so I can say that. So an outsider, not my business, right? But for us as Christians, there are certain seminaries you tell me about, I'll tell you, my law. Because you can come in as a Christian and graduate as an unbeliever by the time you're done. Because a lot will have changed in your brain that you ask whether you still believe that Bible or not. And there are a few of them in Canada. A few of them. And so it calls for wisdom. Number 3, you can still come in as a worker, right? That is still possible. There are some of these things that have been cut off also. It's also experiencing some changes. But if you're coming in under certain employment category, you will need to have the employer compliance fee paid. That's $230, right? Some of you have heard of $230. That's what that money is for. The employer compliance fee. And that is paid by the employer through the porter. So temporary workers can still come in certain sectors, and there are some that come in as seasonal workers, in the apple field and the rural areas and certain agricultural things, because they still need help. So that is still doable. There are employment that are what we call LMIA exempts. And there are employments that LMIA means labor market impact assessment. LMIA. Right? Here is forget about the big word. Let me tell you the gist behind. The rule is, if you want to hire a foreigner, convince me, government, that there is no Canadian who can do the job. Convince me there is no permanent resident here who can do the job. If you can convince me, I will give you an LMIA certificate. That's what it means. And that LMIA is issued by Service Canada. And there are various ways to convince them that yes. So sometimes we'll submit advertisement on certain websites to show, look, we have tried to recruit somebody for their field, that's shortage, right? We can argue correctly that there's still shortage of trained clergy in this country. Nobody wants to be a priest. Don't ask me why. Women, answer why yourself. I was begging one yesterday. I said, let your husband be a priest. He said, you know what she said to me? He said, God has to convince me for my husband to be a priest. Just last night. There's still that. So there are occupations that are still under pressure. No doubt about that. But the work permit aspect is there. Now, under the work permit, there's a huge stream. You're talking of almost 30 different options. Employer-driven class is still there. Occupation in demand, what they call the OIC, is still there. There are certain occupations that are exempt from that LMIA I mentioned, right? Especially the C50 options. So those jobs are exempt from LMIA. You don't have to. Now, to get the LMIA, I said earlier, you pay. I think it's about $1,000. Imagine an employer wanting 5 employees. You know how much that is? And that is why you now see some people. You know, I had somebody's buying LMIA for $70,000 just to buy it. Oh yeah. People pay, and some of them will be shocked. And some, yeah, because they get the LMIA and they just go to some country and say, hey, I'll get it for you, 80 grand. And people pay. Lord have mercy. Right? When it is real. Okay, I'm not saying it's all right to go and buy it. I did not say that. But I'm only saying these things are real and they're actually happening. The only one that is painful is that when after you have paid your 70,000, it is not fake. It is that one. When it is fake now, it is that one that will now be Or we had one recently in Saskatchewan. The address of the employment they gave to this person is farmland. The guy had paid. He came. He went to. He was so excited. He got to the location. All he saw was farmland. I said, hey, go. Now your employer is the field. And I'm not exaggerating. So please be careful. Be careful. All right. But there's still other options with that. Now, each of, of course, there are other temporary ones. Some will come in as visitor, and for some reasons, they don't want to go back to their country, legitimate reasons. Some, they have no place to go to. Some people came in to visit from Ukraine. They got no place to return to now, right? Everywhere has been blown up. Came in from Gaza. Your house is gone. Some people from parts of Nigeria. Boko Haram has visited them. Is that not? And so they are able to apply as refugees. Conventional refugees, we call them. Right? Once you are approved as conventional refugee, generally you have 180 days to apply for your permanent resident. Boom. Live and direct. Once you are approved as conventional refugee, now you know why too many students, are you getting it now? I did not say come to Canada and apply for refugee. So before people start quoting me out of context, I did not say that. But if there are legitimate reasons, there are things we are looking for, right? There are things the refugee protection officer is looking for to even consider your application. Is there any threat to your life? Check mark number 1. Is there alternate flights? Alternate flight solution. In other words, your house in Jos is being blown up. Can you go to Lagos and still survive? No. All right. Then there are other issues. Right? And then the likelihood of death. And of course, we want to be sure that your story meets those 3 guidelines. If you are telling another story, you just discover that your application will be thrown out. But there are things to be considered, okay, in that situation. So that's something to put into consideration. Well, the American system is slightly different. They also have temporary and permanent resident, no doubt. One more thing I did not add is the spousal, right? There are some who come in as single, beautiful cyst, handsome bro, right? And then they find beautiful cyst who are Canadian citizens or permanent resident, or handsome bro who are permanent residents. And that's why sometimes I say some of our young people who are citizens, shine your eye, or permanent residents, shine your eye. Because some of them, it's not that they want to, it is that paper, it is that status you have they are interested in. So shine your eye. And then before they start telling you, you are the only sugar in my tea. And then once they get their paper, you speak English. Amen. So let's be very careful. Let's be very careful. But that's an option. It's legitimate. If you're married to a Canadian citizen, except you are a threat, even when you are out of status, take note. You know what it means to be out of status? Meaning your document has expired, When your document expires in Canada, you have 90 days to restore. So if you have a work permit and it expires today, and for whatever reason you did not submit, and today it has expired, you now have 90 days to restore your status back. That's extra money. It's not a lot. It's less than $300, or is it $340 now? I'm not sure. Well, some of the fees are changing. It used to be $200 extra on top of whatever you are paying, okay, to restore your status. So you have that. You're always going to have that 90 days. So if you're out of status, don't go and jump into the waters. You still have 90 days to play the game. Calm down, okay? And don't worry, I'll take your question soon. Again, like I said, we can't say it all. So if you are out of status and you're married to a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, except, I repeat, there's always that clause. If you are a threat, you are a criminal, there's always, in most cases, they pretend you are not there. It's not that they don't know. Because you can be, once your spouse decides to sponsor you, they pretend you are not there. And so you can be sponsored, become permanent resident, because you have a spouse who is a Canadian citizen or permanent resident. That's always what we call the Section 25 also. For those, what we call the best interest of the child, right? The best interest of the child. You have the child is a Canadian citizen. You don't want to deport parents. You would think twice now, right? We can now go into what we call the H&C, and then the argument, you can bite that section, put your teeth on it, make sure you don't let it off your mouth. What we call the best interest of the child, right? And so sometimes you have temporary residents, they are here as students, they are here as workers, now they have Canadians, children, right? So then you may be presenting a different case to be sure. Now, again, we are not recommending taking advantage of the system. That would be legal for me to do that. But these are options, legal, appropriate. The permanent resident option, I'll stop there because, again, we can't exploit in one day. You also have the permanent resident option. Some people will come in as PR, right? Straight, by sponsorship. Your husband, your wife, your parents, your children. Parents can sponsor children. Children can sponsor parents. We know that, right? That's allowed. The only difference is if you want to sponsor your wife or your husband, you cannot be on social services. Right? You don't need to show that you have money. It's not required. You can sponsor your wife, you can sponsor your husband with you don't have money in your account. It's okay. Only for spousal sponsorship. But if you want to do it for your parents or for your children, you must demonstrate that you can look after them. So we will be asking you for 3 years NOA, Notice of Assessment. Now it has changed slightly now because now you have to submit what we call expression of interest. The government opens it when you want to sponsor your parent. They will tell you, okay, we are opening it for 60 days. All of us rush to the pump. Then they close the door. Then they will now go through that for the next 1 year. And so you will be getting invitation to apply. Invitation to apply over time. But take note, that's for parental sponsorship. The end goal is that your parents become permanent resident, your children become permanent resident, your husband or your wife become permanent resident. That's okay. But just know the difference between the two. Of course, you can also apply for permanent resident under what we call the point system. It's still the same as what we call the express entry. But don't forget, there are requirements. People want to come under that. But the first question is, have you taken the English exam? If the answer is a no, forget it. Go back, go and study. Do either the CELPIP or the IELTS. And it's valid for how many months? 24 months, 2 years, the same English. Whether it's 24 or 2 years, not the same English now. Right? That's your IELTS. And if one score is low, thank you for donating. Only one. If you are not getting the right number that is needed for one, whether it's listening or speaking or writing, too bad. And that's why I say to people, they think, because I speak English. Prepare. Otherwise, you'll be donating money so that you can have all round. And, of course, if you are overseas, most cases you have opportunity for IELTS. But if you are in Canada, you can do the self-pay. Even as a visitor, if you are thinking of that, that's why there's so many things you can do as a visitor. You can write the exam while you are here. You can take the advantage of self-pay. I am not saying this, but I really mean it. One is easier than the other. I think self-pay is easier for some of us who have taken it. But again, you are hearing Canadian voices compared to the Australian one. IELTS is Australian based, right? So it's just what it is. I'm going to put it this way. You can apply for your permanent resident. Another thing you need to do, if you are thinking of that from overseas, is what we call ECA. How many of you have heard of ECA before? ECA is Education Credential Assessment. All the certificates you obtained before coming to Canada. Right? We want to know. Do you know there are some countries, they say they have BA. You know how many years for BA? 2 years. In Canada, BA cannot be 2 years. So by the time they evaluate it, you just get the result. You tell you all you have is a diploma equal to D. So the purpose of ECA is to make sure some of us from certain countries, you don't have to worry. BA is 4 years, 5 years. So don't worry, it's going to come back. Your result is coming back as B equal to. If you have masters from where you are coming from and it's 1 year or 2 years, don't worry about it. It's going to be the same thing. But there are certain countries, don't think because you see MEd, they've spent 6 years. They may have only spent 3 years to get their so-called MEd. And titles can deceive you. It is when you do the assessment that you know. So you want to know the equivalent. And there are some of them too, there's always what we call the PhD stream, right? There are some provinces that will allow what we call the PhD stream. So if you have a PhD, you could apply for certain things from that. So those of you coming from outside, take note of all that as part of the immigration. Well, I do know that's where I was. Now let me quickly talk about, if you are refused, what do you do? Let me talk about refusal. Because I think I'm really interested. What if you are refused? What do? You can, well, I'll define that. You can appeal, yeah. First thing is, look at what they are saying. Is it true? Now, I have people, you have applied to the US, and you applied to Canada. You think they will not know? I had one not too long ago, and they wrote me and said, your client was refused visa to the US. Of course, I wasn't too happy, so I said, Madam, have you ever applied before? Oh, it is true. I said, so you think they will never know, Abi? Because that question on page 3 is not saying only Canada. Say, have you ever been refused? Even if you have been refused to India, you have been refused. Say yes. It does not mean your application will be refused, please. So even if you have been refused in the US, don't worry. Just answer yes to that question. It does not mean you will not be approved. I can assure you of that. I've done too many of that I would say. It doesn't mean you will not be approved. Does that make sense? So please, I had a brother, it was very painful. He's a clergyman. He did not put it there, and they gave him 5 years. You know what 5 years means? You cannot apply to us again for the next 5 years for misinformation. So some officers can be crazy. To me, that's aggressive, by the way. That's too much punishment. But again, sorry, there's nothing you can do. They essentially are saying you can't apply for 5 years because they are accusing him of misinformation. He knew. So let's make it easy. So if you're in the US or you're in Canada and you want someone to help you, it's like a dead body. Can a dead body hide from the people that will do their work in the mortuary? No. Tell your counsel, look, this is my situation. We know what to say and what not to say, but don't hide it from the man that will really help you. That particular situation was not pleasant until I had to go back. Of course, they were refused, period. I know that. But then it was too late. And so, please, if you have been refused, don't think you are not going to be approved again. But if you are refused, take note of the reason. That you are refused once does not mean you can never have it again. That's not true. You may be refused 5 times, and the 6th time you'll be approved. It's possible. First thing should be to request for a reconsideration. Appeal is not the first thing, Mama. Reconsideration. Try and let the office, if sometime may be, sometimes we let the officer know, Oga, you dropped the ball here. Can we talk about it? That's the meaning of, it's like we're saying, please, reconsider this. And you can write to what we call the immigration program manager first. I think this officer is on lunch. I think this officer was smoking crack when he was making the decision. Can you please? That's, don't write. Well, don't forget the officers are still human beings. They are supposed to act in line with the law, but don't forget they are still human beings. Look, imagine, first application, fraudulent document. Second application, fraudulent document. Third application, fraudulent document. May God help that 4th application, even if it is real. Is that not? So sometimes you still need to back these things up with. I mean, there are some things you'll be scratching. How can they refuse this person? I'll never forget this. One of our bishops in one of our churches in Nigeria, one of the richest dioceses, they refused him and said he will not come back. My God said, brother, they want me in Padawa. I said, that officer, something is wrong with him. I mean, he's the bishop of one of the richest dioceses. And I'm not exaggerating. If I tell you the name of the diocese, you'll be shocked. And then the man was upset. What do you mean, Padawa? It was very insulting. Of course, we pushed it back in, explained story to the officer, and then they approved it. But sometimes you just need reconsideration. The beauty of reconsideration is you don't have to pay a new application fee. They will turn the same application that was refused to approval. Then you get your visa. But don't say the officer was smoking crack. Oh. You know, it's like you are trying to massage the ego. You understand what I'm trying to say? Well, the officer, I think this person is this. This is the true picture. You know, you're writing something. You're making your point without saying something is wrong upstairs. Right? That's the way you can tell somebody something is wrong, but then you are still smiling at that person. We get the gist. That's reconsideration. The second option is what our sister said, you can appeal. If your application is refused in Canada, in most cases you have 15 days to request for judicial review. If it's overseas, you have 30 days to request for a judicial review. But let me warn you, I'll tell you why I don't like it. It's not cheap. An average judicial review, federal court application, you're looking between $3,000 to $10,000. Yeah, it is not cheap. I'm not telling you up front. So it's not cheap. And sometimes, you know, at times I see decisions made by officers, I'm thinking, this officer is wrong. I know he's wrong. But I know my client cannot afford 10 grand. Yeah, somebody says too much. It's because the work there is not cheap also. Well, JR is not cheap. I know it. I've been there, and unfortunately I know. So the first thing is you apply for a leave, which is judicial review. If the judge says yes, then you now go through the process of the trial. Thank God for some of the government lawyers. Some of them are very smart now, and I love it. As soon as they get the judicial review, they look at it. If they think there's any merit, instead of wasting their time on, they call you right away. Say, what can we do to make it right? And then you talk, because they are lawyers. They are not officers. They are government lawyers situated in different parts of Canada. Judicial review will not be held there. Once you want to go to court, that's what it means. I'm going to the federal court. That's what you're saying. And so if there's a way you can resolve an issue, who wants to go to court? Why do we need to go to court when we can sit down and say, oh, well, make we talk now? move on. So that's what they will do. And then we start the conversation. And the example, somebody was refused sometime and said, well, the guy did not get the email. Said, you sent the email. We sent you email, you did not respond. That's why we refused your application. I said, my mailbox is not eating email now. It's not in the spam folder. It's not in the inbox. And you are claiming you sent it. You will show me where you sent it from. Another option is simply, I had one painful. The person was approved, say on a Tuesday, this week. And by next week, Tuesday, a refusal letter showed up. Same application. Same application. I was so angry. I wish let's just cut straight, no question, but we can't. There's no money. It's unfair. It's injustice. But can you afford it? So it's just, okay, we'll try again another time. And that is why you see people from certain countries, when you go through our appeal, I get the email every day, you see more people applying, doing the JR, more from the Asian countries. They've got the thing in their pocket. Less from African countries. We don't have the money. That's the honest truth. And the story is, the third option, apply again. Somebody that was refused, by the time you do it the second time, address what the officer is saying. You know, usually the last sentence of your refusal will tell you, remember you can always reapply again. Just that you have to pay a new application fee. Sometimes you just need to address the concern of the officer, make it clearer, make it simple. They say you don't have money, show us the proof. And some of us that show evidence of money. These guys think, you are putting the account that you only put in $5, $10, $5. All of a sudden, $200, $200,000 show up in one day, bah, and you have printed it. You think of it? I mean, come on. The man is thinking too now. Is that not true? Some of you, at that account, the only transaction there is $100, $50, $100. All of a sudden, $50,000 showed up in one transaction. Where is the money coming from? So you think, see, I'm not making a defense for officers. I'm only telling you the way they think so that you understand why certain things happen. And so you don't spend too much money. Well, of course, I'll tell you, there's what they call way round, but not for this podium. I will stop at that. Nothing negative, but not for this. There are, again, there are some you have heard of fixed deposit before. You've heard of GIC, right? And you've also heard of, there are some banks that will not give statement, they only give you just a letter showing your, but I think we should stop there. I'm told I only have, is it 1 hour, Abby? You don't do now. It's almost an hour. The remaining 9 minutes, I will take questions. And that should be enough for one day, right? She asked me to spend 15 minutes originally, but she changed her mind just before I said, I will tell them you said 15 minutes. She said, no, I did not say it. All right, so the remaining 9 minutes, I'll just use it for questions. I know there's a lot of things we could address. So if you want to have a success, back to your successful immigration, that's why I said you can be refused. If you are refused, that's successful. Answer now. If somebody is refused, that's successful. You see why I had problem with that topic? I told you at the very beginning, right? But there are things you can do to turn things around. And that, as we've done over the years. So for American brothers, can you apply to Canada from the U.S., even if you have no status? It's a yes and no. Yes, you can, depending on the situation. It says, for that kind of question, I can answer you, but you won't get a yes and no direct. It depends on the situation. I need to know what status just expired and what is your situation. Some are filed for asylum. Even though they say you are not in status, you are actually, because as long as you have some people have the EAD, right? Is that not what it is in the U.S.? Employment authorization. It's still okay. As long as that document, that little card is still valid. You are not out of status too. But we'll talk more about that. Sorry, So just to answer the question direct, yes and no. It is possible. Any other question? Online, in person, now you can unmute yourself or send it in a similar way. We have 7 minutes, I'm told, by the original plan. Not the 15 minutes Sister was trying to tell me. Question? Question? If you have a question online, feel free to do the same thing. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir, for shedding more light to things that pertain to immigration. My question is this. Someone that applied for postgraduate work permit, she was given letter of authorization to continue working, and it is already 180 days. They've not yet approved the postgraduate work permit, and the letter of authorization also is expiring like some this time. She has called
Call center.
yes, call center, sent web form, nothing. But she spoke with one of her friends and they were like, she can still continue working. That the letter says you can still continue working till a decision is being made.
Surprise.
So I just want to be confirmed that there's no.
Well, thank you very much. It's as good as what we call implied status. That's what we call implied status. If your visa is to expire by the end of this month, tomorrow, and you submit your application by midnight tonight, they're not going to approve it tomorrow. You know that. But you submit it tonight. You continue what you are doing until a decision is made. Some people use it to buy. They know they are going to refuse the application. So they wait until the midnight, submit it. So they continue whatever they are doing until, and legally, it's okay. Similar. I'm not saying you are using it just to buy time. But as long as you submit before expiration, you have implied status. So if you have received, let me call it approval in principle. I know that's not the name. And then you are told until a decision is made. If it takes them 1 year to make a decision, is it you? Are you the one causing the delay? You have done your part. The problem you will run into is some employers who don't understand how this system works. And they keep pressuring you. I want to see your permit. We want to see your permit. I said, you are not the one now. All you need to show them is show them that letter. Highlight it. If they are in doubt, let them call IRCC. Nothing to worry about. You're not breaking the law. So once your application is submitted, before expiration of your document, you have an implied status, period. If you have submitted your postgraduate work permit and you have a letter, and within that 6 months, they still have not made the decision, continue your life until the decision is made. The only one that may be painful, and we had it. God forbid bad thing, they now refuse. The day, I said, can they refuse work permit? You know, they said, person where they work for morgue, say, have you seen a dead body before? He will tell you, I've seen too many, right? Can they refuse an application? That's why I said I have a problem with that, your topic. When you say success, I know where I'm going with that. It's possible, by the way. Now, here's the point. If you are refused, they are now being gracious. They'll still give you your 90 days. But take note, if you apply for something and you are refused, your implied status ends on the day of your refusal. You know what you are supposed to do? If you are a student, you stop that day. If you are a worker, employment don't finish that day. Painful, but that's what it's supposed to be. If you now work after that date, you are taking you are from your state. In that case, you know what that means? Your own. That's what I mean. I think, does that help? Okay. Any other question? Quickly. 3 minutes. She has more. Sure, we'll do.
Another question is, can someone who is a temporary resident, will I say sponsor? Sponsor
Go ahead.
in case of maybe helping say I want to sponsor my younger brother now. Maybe he's coming here to study, and
you have money.
No, I'm just using that as
I know now. I know what you are saying. I know exactly where you are going with your question. At least continue. I can hear you. All right, continue. Okay.
You want to, as in, use your own account as proof of
Yes.
for your brother.
Yes.
Is he allowed?
All right. The answer, direct answer, yes. With question mark. Right? The question, if you are a student and you have enough money for your brother that's come from another country, officer, don't be mumu. Sometimes you got to start thinking. You are a student and you have $32,000 in your own account to sponsor me just coming in. You will explain where you will get that money from. Right? It's just logical. Right? I mean, and you are a temporary resident. Yeah, exactly. You are also a student yourself. Okay, and the person is working. That is why you have the yes and the no. But you need wisdom. Again, it's on case by case. But is it possible? The answer is a yes. It is possible, but you have to put on the hat of an officer and say, look, I am working. And I have saved $40,000. And you're on the postgraduate work permit. You must be an aggressive saver. Whether open, what is open? You must be look, people who have been working for 20 years, seriously, how many of them have $40,000 in their account? No, seriously. If I ask some of you to cut a check of 20,000 today, say, Bishop, you want to kill us? Do you understand what I'm telling you? So officers also think out of the box. Now, is it possible? Yes. I know there are things people do. They pull money from credit card. They pull money from line of credit. I'm aware of all the other workarounds. I get your point. They do this, they do that. Yes. But to your question, is it possible? But maybe you shouldn't use the word sponsor. You can't sponsor when you yourself, you need to be sponsored. You are not the owner of the house. You are trying to rent out my house and you are just a visitor. You don't even have a key to come in. You are telling me you want to open the door for someone. Then I'll push the two of you outside. That's the logic behind it. So, seriously, not the word sponsor, but as a supporting document, yes. Now, it could also mean something good, or it could send a wrong signal to the officer. What is this person trying to do? If there is another option, please use that option. But if that's the last resort, do it. It might work. So it is a yes, you can do it. But if there's somebody else that can do it for you, it's a good idea. But that's not to say you cannot. Yes, you can do it. You can. And it doesn't mean the application is going to be refused based on that only. But if the question is you are submitting a bank statement for 6 months, and all you've been putting in is 500, 1,000, 500, 1,000, all of a sudden, 2 days before the application, $25,000 showed up. You are already trying to guarantee a refusal for your brother. Because the question is, where is that $25,000 coming from? Just understand what the officer is thinking. Now, if you use that $25,000 to buy a GIC, I will not stop. I will not say more than that. Because this thing is in front of me. But seriously, if you use it to buy a GIC with a letter, it's only the date of the letter we know. We don't know the date you bought the GIC. Right? We'll leave it at that. I hope that it's clear enough. Right? That same 25,000 can work for you in other ways. If it's your money, it's still your own. Hopefully it is. But I'm aware that sometimes it is not. It is from Shola, Kende, Idu, Alaba. So, but if it is yours, why not? Have I said enough for one day? We can't say it all in 1 hour. Thank you very much.
First, I want to ask, is it possible for a temporary resident to invite somebody? For instance, maybe your parents or your grandparents. My second question is, for instance, when you're applying for permanent residence, are you required to present a proof of funds? Maybe for now. The camera, my lord.
Can you invite, even as a temporary resident, capital yes. You can invite your parents. You can invite your brother. It's on case by case. It's not so much about, and that's one thing about invitation. Let me warn you. That you have invited me to come. Do you know you don't have power to send me out? So let me warn you. I invited you to this country. I'm going to deport. Now lie. Now, you can't. Are you CBSA? I can send you out of my house. I can cause problem for you. What I mean by, there is a bad thing here. There is one phone number. They call it tips. Go and look at your phone book. CBSA. They don't need to. They won't even ask for your name. All they are asking is just there is somebody working at Walmart that does not have paper. His name is Andrew Paul. Hang up and go. Leave the rest. You will see somebody will show up at Walmart. Right? If you're in Regina, those guys, they are hiding at Hamilton Street. That corner of 11th Avenue, that office you see there. And there are a few people there. That's part of their job. They will show up. Can we talk to Auntie? And are you working? And here's what I advise, by the way. In as much as I'm not encouraged. If you ever get that kind of knock, refuse to talk until you have a counsel. And we've had a few unfortunate situations. You said too much. By the time we get into the process, I had a lady who literally gave them password to our computer. And so they have copied email. And so by the time we talked, we were trying to argue, say, Oga, they don't use Oga. It's like, we have copies of pay stub. Ha! I said, madam, did you give them pay stub? He said, no. What did you do? He said, I gave them my password. I said, already. It's difficult. So you have a right to say, I don't want to say a word until I have my counsel. And they will respect it. Same thing applies to the police. Gently, you don't have to be rude. I need a counsel. And when your counsel shows up, police officer, excuse us. We'll talk. Privately. Same thing in the law. I mean, they will allow you to have your conversation in a secured place. They are not monitoring anything. Just, it's private. And then, so that your counsel will know how best to look after your case. It is possible to invite anybody you want. And some of us too, let me add one more thing. Some of us talk too much. And Ogiri is latest. You know what that means? You know what is Ogiri is latest? For those of you who don't speak Yoruba, I will explain just to help you. You see, we are not saying in any way advising you to bring, all time if we said you should bring, no. But generally, okay, I'll use the example of my dear sister. It's now a testimony, so I will use it. There's a sister in this town. Sister Beautiful Rosemary. And she has shared it herself, so all of us can now know. Years ago, I'm talking of 20 years ago, she just came. She's a nurse from Nigeria. She got a job. She has not started. And then they said, hold your brother in the church to pray. Hold your sister in the church to pray. And she shared that story with another person. In a church, if I'm pointing this way, that church is on this side. But I will not tell you the name. So I'm not making up stories. She was very sincere. That week, immigration called her. Said, what did I do now? Said, well, we heard you already. Said, no, I have not started. And then she gave her own side of the story. Now, and anytime you jokingly say, let us pray. Say, can you sort of hear before you move? So anytime she's in church, and I say, hold your partner, I say, a lie. Say, a lie. Why is she saying that? Not because she was. The other sister was not. She was just so excited, and she mentioned it to another person. Coincidentally, that other person is a CBSA officer. And then they felt she was doing something illegal. And I've experienced it once, right? I applied for a U.S. visa years ago. More than 20 years now. And they refused. And we were ready to fight them, being sincere. I only applied here. They refused the application. I would never forget that officer's name. Now I can mention his name because there's no shaka. His name is Richard Appleton. That's his name. He refused the application. So my bishop then got angry. Me too, I was angry. So we all wrote very strong letters, including the Bishop of Capel at that time, Bishop Duncan. How dare you refuse a priest going to a church just to preach in New York? And then we wrote and did whatever. So they also got angry. They wrote to CBSA. So CBSA had to invite me in. And bad thing about downtown, once they close that door, you can't go out. Don't worry, don't worry about it. It's on 1900 Hamilton Street. Once you enter and they close that door, they need code for you to come out. So I knew something was wrong. And they did not ask me to bring my wife and children. No, it's only me. They said I should come. So I showed up at that point, and the guy put it straight to my face. So you are walking illegally. What do you mean? Well, we know you are working at St. James Anglican Church. I said, well, I don't enter them. That Redeemed Church down there used to be an Anglican church many years back. So I knew where the problem was from. And then they brought out a copy of my license, which I submitted with the application to U.S. Embassy in Calgary at that time. And before they called me, they had called the church, they had called the priest, they've called other people. None of them confirmed what they were looking for. So that's why they eventually brought me in. Now, it was pure misunderstanding, unknown to that officer, which is the difference in Canada. That's where I will stop. You can work as a clergy in Canada without a work permit, in quote. In the U.S., it's different. You need the R1 visa. Right? It is considered a charitable work. On the other side, na lie, employment. Right? So, complete difference. So all they did was they looked at my study permit at that time. I came in as a student at that time. But then they've forgotten that the man that you call a student has been a priest before coming. Good enough, the day I went there, I was wearing collar. And that was when the officer then, his name was Rob. So the first accusation, so it is true. I said, what is true? That you are working at so place. I said, well, but I'm a priest. I'm allowed to do it. So they went in, they looked at it. Eventually, I was free. They collected my study permit at that point, issued a new one, and then put a remark at the bottom, authorized to work at so. Now, imagine, do you think CBSA will just come looking for me? Somebody tipped them off. That's the essence of that story. Somebody tipped them off. That sister, it was prayer meeting, but somebody tipped them off. So be very careful what you say and who you talk to about the story of your life. Do you understand my story now? That's the reason for that Yoruba English. Ogri ladies. Thank you very much. Right? That is the rationale behind it. So be very careful. Canada has a tip line. Anybody can call. They don't have to disclose their name. They don't have to disclose who they are. All they need to do is, I am aware John Peter Paul is working at Walmart. Full stop. End of story. It's there in your phone book. Just go to immigration. You will see the toll-free number. In almost every city. None of you should be involved. Please. And we've had a few that we are. Oh, it's not another question. That's enough for one day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Briefly, before we move on to the next thing, I want our mommy, Mrs. Olua, to come and help us appreciate our Baba on behalf of the whole women in the diocese of ADOTT.
Praise the Lord. Praise the living Jesus. Baba, we have learned so much tonight and we really thank you. So on behalf of Mama ADOTT and all the women of ADOTT, want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for telling us so much about the immigration system, both in Canada and the US.